Before the buildings, bitumen and crowds, our lands were looked after by traditional owners, people who embodied readiness in their awareness and connection to their environment. We have so much to learn from them. We ask that you take a moment to think about the traditional owners and First Nations of the land you are on. Pay respect to them and thank them, their elders past, present and emerging, as we meet on their lands today. Let us always respect them, cherish them and listen to the land. Hello, I'm Peter Rekas and thanks for dialing in. I need to start with an apology for those of you who were expecting to dial into the live webinar. As you probably heard, we had a technical issue last night when a severe thunderstorm hit my office and I lost power about 15 minutes before we were going to go live. While everything was protected by uninterruptible power supplies and data backups and all that are in place, it would have been foolish to try and do a live broadcast in the middle of an electrical storm, so I apologise for that. I need to start with a couple of thank yous. The project is funded by the Bushfire Community Resilience and Economic Recovery Fund, which is a great fund to help New South Wales after those devastating fires and other situations. Resilience New South Wales and the New South Wales Small Business Commissioner pulled together the template that we're going to be working with today. And also a big thanks to Uralla Shire Council and the Business Chamber who have got on board to get the word out about this fantastic project. The template we're going to be working with, you've been sent out, and it's a great little template. It's very straightforward and very simple. We're going to walk through it today, and you'll see how easy it is. It's a 5-step process. We're going to talk about what risks you've got that you face, what you're going to do now, getting the business ready, which is some of the practical things that you can do, how to be aware, how to find out what's going to happen to you, and then looking out for each other, which is hugely important. Speaking of the business chamber, getting to know other people and networking is a fantastic way to build strength in your community, in your business community, particularly in supply chain. And we'll hear a lot about supply chain as we talk through this. There are all sorts of ways that businesses can be devastated by a disaster and all sorts of other things. In the Blue Mountains 2013 fires, the economic impact was terrible. About 518 jobs were lost, 24.5 million in wages and salaries alone. And that's 518 households and families that are impacted. So you need to ask yourself, if business was interrupted by a disaster, how long would you be able to survive? Think of all these things, and every business is different. You may be, a consultant who can operate with a mobile phone and a laptop, or you might be a farm that's got heavy machinery, equipment and supplies that you need. So you need to think about your business as being unique and what are the things that are going to impact you. Imagine if your business was shut for a month. How long would you be able to last? How long could you afford to pay wages or allow staff to take accrued paid leave? How long before they'd need to look elsewhere for employment? Where else might they get a job? What would be the impact on their families and also on their kids? The roll-on impacts of disasters are devastating. Therefore, involving staff in disaster preparation and planning is a great way to build this. So I'd encourage you, as you work through this plan, to get your staff involved. Get them helping, get them thinking about it, because if they understand the risks, then you'll have a better chance of getting buy-in. Let me give you a little case study from a company that I did some work with. This is dating back to the Brisbane floods. A mid-tier law firm, around 20 staff, and their office was on the 6th floor, but it was near the river. What happened during the floods was that the government suddenly declared that the central business district of Brisbane needed to be evacuated at 3 p.m. on Monday. The main floods didn't hit till Wednesday, but it didn't give people much time to do planning and so on. Now, this company wasn't too worried. They were up on the 6th floor. It's all fine. A couple of days later, this is what the street looked like outside their building. As you can see, significant flooding, but again, they weren't too worried. They had the 6th floor office And somebody said they had a disaster plan. And they went, oh, where is it? They eventually worked out it was in the basement store cupboard that they'd forgotten all about, well, a store room. In that room was 10 years worth of records and the disaster plan. Sadly, they had forgotten all about the storeroom and all of the vital records there. It ended up costing that small business $60 million in impacts, all sorts of follow-on impacts as a result of that. They called me in and asked me for a price on developing a disaster plan for them, and that was sent to their head office in Melbourne, who basically declined and said, look, the chances of Brisbane flooding again are next to nil, so thanks but no thanks. I said, fair enough, I understand, get that a lot. So I sent them back this picture. The building in the background is the Melbourne head office. This is in a devastating flood that obviously hit some time back in Melbourne, but disasters could happen anywhere, anytime. I saw this the other day. The United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction came up with this one. $1 spent on resilience, that is things like business continuity, can avoid $15 in disaster losses. Now that figure used to be $10. They've now raised that up to $15, which is a significant rise. So if this costs you however many dollars now, multiply that by 15, that's how much you're saving if your business gets impacted. I want to talk about a couple of other concepts that are part of this. One of my favourite sayings is, failing to plan is planning to fail. What are the differences? Okay, so planning is a discussion. It's talking through the what ifs. One of my favourite examples is if you're on a family holiday and you tell the family, if we get separated by some sort of disaster event, head to the nearest McDonald's. From there, we'll catch up with each other. It's a safe place. There's food, there's toilets, it's family safe, all that sort of thing. That's planning. That's having a chat. That's not writing it down. You don't need to come up with a document and give it to all the members of the family. You've just had a chat and everyone goes, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. Exercising. That's trying out what we're going to do. Now that can be hard in a disaster operation. You don't want to maybe evacuate your warehouse just for a practice. But walking it through and thinking about, you know what, it'd be much quicker if we had, for example, an extra forklift. Oh, good idea. Where can we get an extra forklift? I know a guy down the road who's got one and he's up on a hill, so he's not likely to be affected by a flood. Exercising it is a good way to think through the practicalities. Plan. Now this is the actual document where we write it down. Now, I know many of you are probably, very small businesses, even a sole trader, and you're probably thinking to yourselves, I don't need to write it down in a plan because I'm the only person who's going to read it. Well, let me tell you a couple of reasons why it's a good idea. Firstly, if you're not just a sole trader and you need to communicate it to other people in, say, 6-12 months' time, you can tell them to sit down and have a look at that as they go through their induction and they can read it through. Another one is, as you'll see in the template, a lot of the information that's being captured is information you've already got. The thing is that what we're doing is we're bringing that information into one place. We're putting in, for example, all of the insurance details into one place. And we'll talk through the plan in a moment and you'll get a clearer picture of that. So let's have a look at the actual document itself and think about how it works. I've talked through the 5 steps. It's very simple. Keep it as simple as you possibly can. If you're making this complicated, you're probably not going to follow through, and that's the last thing I want. First of all, first thing we want to do is know our risk. Now, there's all sorts of risks, and you're going to find that some of the risks detailed in the plan aren't relevant to you, such as East Coast low, tsunami, those sort of things are not going to be relevant. But you need to think about it. But I also want you to think beyond just standard risks. I don't want you to just think about storms, fires, floods, those sort of things. Think about the risks in your area and what's going to impact your unique business. Here's a good way to think about it. If you think about a primary level risk, that's the one where it's a direct hit. That's a fire or a flood impacting you directly. You've got those sorts of issues of damage, repair, being closed, staff employment, and of course bills just keep on coming in. Sort of things we're talking about there are floods and fires, structural fire, a fire next door. A friend of mine recently had to move out of her house because there was a fire next door and she still hasn't been able to move back in. Even though she might have had smoke alarms and done all the right things, the neighbour didn't. Secondary are the sort of things that are impact your supply chain, such as a key supplier being hit or staff being impacted. If you've got a key staff member who has a particular skill set that nobody else has, if you lose them, that could be a business continuity issue. Think about the sorts of things that are going to be impacted if that happens to you, and the sort of causes a supply being impacted, infrastructure out, or transit routes cut. A tertiary one might be something that you didn't even think about. Supplies are delayed or staff is limited because of roads closed. I mean, if a trucking company that you rely on in Armidale and they can't get through, then that's going to impact you. So think creatively about the wider sorts of risks that you face. Next is plan for what you'll do. If a disaster threatens the business, you need to know answers to 3 questions. What needs to be done? How will it be done? And who will do it? That's pretty straightforward stuff to be able to decide who's going to logically look after things. What can you do to get your business ready now? There are 5 actions to prepare that you should think about. Develop an insurance plan. Back up data to the cloud, or, I'm old-fashioned. I actually use portable hard drives and a separate laptop. It depends on your circumstances as to what is best. Think about what fixtures and stock you can move easily, including heavy vehicles. Build a general building maintenance program that's going to protect you from as much damage as possible. And think about an emergency essentials kit. And again, that's going to be unique to your business. Next, there are 5 plans we want to think about for continuity. You might need to think about an alternate operating location. You might need to think about an alternate source of stock. You might need to think about methods to maintain customer relations, ways to keep staff engaged, and protect other critical areas. I once met a woman on a plane and we were talking about what I do, and she told a story which was really interesting. She worked for a company that supplied hairdressing supplies. Shampoos, conditioners, hairspray, all those sort of things. Their warehouse was burnt down. And so the first thing they did was they booked a couple of motel rooms and they set up an office in the motel rooms. And a team started to ring around to all of their customers. Meanwhile, another team was sent out to every supermarket they could find and buy up every bottle of shampoo, conditioner, hairspray, and so on and so on. They then made up boxes and they took them round to each of their customers and said, look, we're not going out of business. This will just get you by. But keep faith with us. And you know what? They did. They survived. It was a tough time. People had to work very hard, but they survived. So those things for continuity are really valuable. Next thing we want to think about is being aware. Connect with relevant emergency services. There are some fantastic apps out there and obviously social media connections. I've used things like Fires Near Me and Live Traffic a lot. When I'm on the road in New South Wales, I want to know where the fires are and whether the roads are closed and how I can get through. Those sort of sources are really good. Think about the ones that are relevant to you and dial up to them now. They're great. Next, and this is a huge one, look out for each other. Connections are incredibly important. Connect with people who are in similar cases to you. Help with prepare and help with rebuilding. It may well be that you think you're going to need a bulldozer if you have to repair. Find somebody now who's got one and build a relationship with them so you can, ensure that hopefully it'll be available at the time. Building connections is incredibly important. And again, I mentioned the chamber, the business chamber. Join there, get to know some people, get to know the people who are going to be helpful to you. A really good way to think of it is on the day of a disaster, some people are going to have information that you're going to want, and some people are going to want information that you've got. If you can work out what those questions and answers are now, then that will all work very, very quickly. Now let's have a look through the actual document itself. Now it's about 40 pages. It's not big, and a lot of it you're not going to need to look at. Fairly straightforward stuff. There's only 6 disasters mentioned here, and a couple of those, tsunami certainly not going to be relevant to where you are. But you might think of other ones that are useful, and you might want to take one of those ones and apply it to the particular one that's useful to you. We'll skip some of this stuff. There's good background information there that'll help you through this after you've finished watching the video. And then the document itself is pretty straightforward. It's tick and flick. You can put priorities on the risks. There's templates that you might need. Things to fill in, who's going to do what, digital signature, date. They've made it pretty straightforward and pretty clear. Plan for how you're going to move stock, equipment, fixtures. And again, that may not be relevant to all of you, but it could well be, and that's important to go through it all. Protecting your property. What can you do now that will help protect you? Develop a financial plan. Now, you might want to sit down with some other experts on this to go through exactly what are the things that could impact you. Speak to accountants, business advisors, those sort of things. Insurance plan. If I were to ask you right now who you're insured with for, let's say, car, contents, I don't know what else you've got, public liability, professional indemnity, those sort of things, you may not be able to quickly rattle them off really quickly and have policies. So here's a place where you can write all that information in. Now, you've got all that information now. It's just a question of putting it into this document to help you build that clear picture. The emergency plan. What are you going to do on the day? Who's going to do what? Who's going to drive the truck? How many horse floats will we need? Etc., etc. You're each going to have unique challenges. What are going to be the things that you need to think about? Emergency contacts. Who are the people you're going to need to be able to talk to? Again, you've got all this information. You've got it all accessible. You just need to add that information in. Then it goes into some specific procedures on specific threats: bushfire, structural fire, severe weather, flood, chemical incident, and other. So there's gaps for you to be able to put in your own. Okay, so the emergency plan. Who are the staff? What job are they doing? And how do we contact them? What if all electricity's down and you've got no access to digital records, and of course you forgot to charge your phone, so your phone's down? Here would be a paper record of the actual information you need. Backing up data. We all have our own way of backing up data, but it's vitally important to be able to back up the entire business, all of the information you need, but also how you're going to be able to access it. A lot of backup programs need you to have a computer with the same software on it. So make sure that, okay, while we've backed it up there, we've got something that can download that and uncompress, if you like, the data that we've got stored there. Data backup plan, copying it, how it works. Bet your bottom dollar that the person who runs this will be away the week that it happens, and so you're going to need somebody else who can look after it, who understands it. Alternative operating locations. Now, if you're a farmer, that's not likely to be a possibility, except you might want to think about, if you need to relocate stock, where will you take them to? If you're a solicitor, accountant, business consultant, then you can probably operate out of a nearby motel. So think about what are the locations you might need to go to and what things will you need to take with you to be able to work there. Supply chain. This is huge. We all think about the impact that might be on our business, but to think about the supply chain, who they are, and if you need unique supplies, then it might be very hard to source them. If you're an ice cream shop, there aren't so many ice cream distributors available. So think about those now. What are you going to do? Maintaining customer relations. This is huge. You need to be able to call up your key customers and say, we're operating, we'll be fine, give us a day or two to get back on our feet, etc., etc. Key business contacts, your accountant, your lawyer, property manager, bank, insurance agent. Again, you've got all this information. It's all available. You just need to write it down and put it into this document. How will you safeguard all your critical business areas? So how do you make sure that if there's a key skill in the business, How do you hand that off to somebody else if you need to? Who can do various things like financial, the accountant, those sort of things. Landlord, rent details, where are spare keys kept? This is all no-brainer stuff, and yet it's the sort of thing that we never write down, and it's really important to write it down. Train staff. Who's had a session of talking through this and understands it, and you've got them all on board. Record that so you know that who has been trained in what key skills, and when future planning is being trained, future training is planned for them. Premises maintenance. What are the things that you can do now? Cleaning gutters, check wiring, all sorts of stuff. Making sure you've got sandbags if that's what you're likely to need. A backup generator. They're not expensive to buy, and it could be a huge help to you. Being aware. What are we going to use as our primary sources of information for detailed information on the day something's happening? Looking out for each other. Who are our key contacts that we're going to maintain relationships with to be able to strengthen not just us, but our entire business community? So now we go into some disaster-specific checklists. So here's one about bushfire. Have we thought about these things? Flood, storm, structural fire, pandemic. Who'd have thought if I'd asked you 2 years ago whether we'd need to have a pandemic checklist? Tsunami, probably not relevant to you, but it's worth thinking through in terms of earthquake. There are other things to think about. So that's the document. It's not hard. It really won't take you long at all. A lot of it you could possibly hand off to somebody else. If you've got reception staff, they might be able to look at it and track down those various phone details, insurance details, all those sort of things. It's worth handing that process off if you can. But I implore you, please do this. It's a great resource. It's free. There are other resources available on the website. Go to the website and have a look. You'll be able to get a clear idea of the sorts of things that could help you, and as I say, for your specific business. Now, between now and hopefully the next live webinar, we're giving you an opportunity to have a go at it, work it through. If in that time you have any questions, I want you to email them to me and I'll address them at that second webinar. So peter@crisisready.com.au. I will build up a list of those questions and we'll eventually upload those to a website as a frequently asked questions page. But for now, just email them to me. I'll try and answer them. Write the email down and hang on to it. I'm very happy to talk. If I can help you in any way, I'm very happy to. That's all for now. Well done. You've taken the first step towards business continuity. The next step is to jump into that plan, have a go at it. It really isn't hard. I really implore you to really have a go. Thanks very much.